So emotional intelligence is a skill. You're not leading machines. And the truth of the matter is when you lead human beings without emotional intelligence, it actually cripples your bottom line.
Welcome to HR Uncensored. I'm Juliet Gateri, a HR consultant with over 15 years of experience, and I help organizations across industries build structure, manage performance, and navigate complex people dynamics. One of those questions is about emotional intelligence, and they rate their manager very low. Because now they want a manager who's soft, who's not, doesn't keep them accountable.
Emotional intelligence is not being soft.
So today we are asking a very uncomfortable question. Can someone be successful and still be destructive? And what happens when leadership blind spots go unchecked? Simply because performance looks good on paper. Mucha Mlingo is an award-winning emotional intelligence practitioner. She's also a transformational leadership catalyst and founder of PTS Africa, the emotional intelligence company. A high-performing leader who delivers results but leaves a trail of burnout.
Desire to start hard. Can I be in between, like hire but get a coach?
Hi, Mucha.
Hi.
Welcome to HR Uncensored.
Thank you for having me.
So before we start, I have a couple of questions. It's a hire or fire. Hire is a yes. Fire is a no.
Okay.
So a high-performing leader who delivers results but leaves a trail of burnout.
You desire to start hard. Can I be in between, like hire but get a coach?
Okay. Hire but get a coach. The second one, I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to win. A leadership mindset.
Fire.
Okay. Keeping toxic leaders because they bring in money.
Fire.
Okay. Promoting your best performer into leadership without assessing emotional intelligence.
Again, I'd tweak that, right? So I would promote them, but I'd promote them with support on leadership development.
Okay.
Yeah.
A leader who is brilliant but emotionally unpredictable.
Are they coachable? Because if they're coachable, we can work with them. But if they're not, it's a fire.
Okay. So let's get into it.
Yes.
So maybe just describe for us what emotional intelligence is and how do we apply it, especially in people managing roles.
All right. So emotional intelligence, if I put it very simple, is being, intentional about our feelings. The truth of the matter is we were created with feelings, and as much as many of us would deny it, our emotions drive our behavior. So the emotional part of the brain is the one that is responsible for the actions that we take. It works in conjunction with the rational part of the brain, but our emotions are powerful enough to override rational thinking. So emotional intelligence is, number one, being aware, paying attention to what is going on beneath the surface. Number two, it's then making an intentional choice. So I feel this particular way, I'm going to act in this particular way. I always like to say emotions are data, but emotions are not directives. So it's information that's critical. It's good for me to know what's going on beneath the surface, but then I have, the choice on how to deal with that. So emotional intelligence is being aware, being intentional about how we use that emotional information, and then being purposeful about the impact that will have. And for leaders, for HR professionals, this is critical because the impact that our interactions has with people is what ultimately will drive performance.
Okay. But does emotional intelligence, how can we rate our emotional intelligence? Does it have to do with our background, exposure? Because most of us don't know what emotional intelligence is.
Yeah. So emotional intelligence is a skill. And that's why the work I do is so exciting for me. And that's why with those questions you asked, I was like, I want to put a little bit of a twist to it because it's not a trait, it's a skill.
Yeah.
Anything that's a skill is something that we can learn. Now, definitely your personality can impact what your default tendencies are. Your upbringing will impact what your default tendencies are. But you are able to rewire, there's this idea of neuroplasticity in the brain. So I can notice that there are particular patterns that aren't serving me well and make the intention to shift and change those patterns. Yes, it requires work, but it is possible to change. And I think that's what's so exciting about the work of EQ, because research shows over and over again that individuals who have high emotional intelligence are more successful. And we're not talking about something that you have or you don't have. We're talking about something you can develop. I like to use the example, when we measure emotional intelligence, we measure a range of competencies. One of the competencies we measure is empathy. Now, if you look at a group of children playing in a playground and there's an accident, one of the kids falls over, there could be one child who naturally runs to the fallen child to check, are you okay? So we would say that child has natural empathic tendencies, whereas the other children just carried on playing. Maybe empathy doesn't come naturally for them, but it doesn't mean they can't learn it. They can learn that, wow, I need to be mindful of how other people feel, of what's going on with other people, and that's a skill I develop. So you may come upon some of those EQ competencies naturally. Some of them you have to work on them, but it is a skill.
So you can learn emotional
100%.
intelligence.
100%. You know that saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks?
Yes.
When it comes to emotional intelligence, it's not true.
Okay. And when it comes to performance in the workplace, a high performer but has low emotional intelligence, you've mentioned coaching.
Yeah.
So what does that intervention look like for somebody? Does somebody have to be intentional? Like, the way we prescribe rehab, you have to be intentional. I want to go to rehab.
Yeah.
So is it the same
Yeah,
thing?
it is the same. And that's why I asked in that question, is this someone who's coachable, right? Because you can't change a person, right? There's nothing you can do to change a person. They need to realize that change is necessary.
Yeah.
And so the first question is this leader coachable? Is this someone who is open to the fact that, the truth is, in most organizations, if not all, we promote people on the basis of their technical capabilities, which makes sense. You're good at the task we hired you for. But leadership is a whole new thing. It's a whole new skill set. And so if you have a leader who recognizes that, yes, I'm great at my technical competence, however, when it comes to people management, I need some work, and they're willing to do the work, then the sky is the limit. And those are the leaders who become more successful. Because the truth of the matter is, the higher up you grow in leadership, you're no longer doing the technical work, right? You are leading the people who are doing the technical work. And that is a completely different skill set.
So how does that intervention look like? Let's say, for example, Juliet, very good in HR. Technically, she can do performance reviews, excellent. So what on the people aspect, Juliet, for example, is very weak in terms of, you mentioned empathy. Because when somebody comes late, for example, Juliet wants to do a disciplinary. So what does now the intervention for Juliet, where do we start?
So I think one of the things that's critical to understand is to understand Juliet herself. So typically when we provide interventions that are one-on-one, it starts with, just that initial check-in, the initial self-assessment. So we have a number of tools that we use that help us to measure what is the baseline, right? So we work with Juliet to understand, to build that self-awareness. Because without that self-awareness, self-management cannot exist. So the first step is developing self-awareness. And that can be done through assessments, that can be done through coaching, one-on-one conversations with Juliet to help her understand how she's showing up and the impact of the behavior. One of the things that we do with leaders is we start by helping them see the impact. And the impact to the bottom line. Because you're leading human beings. You're not leading machines. And the truth of the matter is, when you lead human beings without emotional intelligence, it actually cripples your bottom line. So often with leaders who think emotional intelligence is this wishy-washy, airy-fairy, kumbaya kind of thing, we show them the data, show them the bottom line impact. So the work we do with Juliet is first some self-assessment so that Juliet can have a baseline to understand where her levels, because maybe it's empathy, but maybe it's something else. And also, what are her strengths? Because it's important for us to know what those strengths are. Then it's having conversations about the bottom line impact, right? So if Juliet proceeds along this way, this is the impact that it has. Bottom line, we're talking about, the results she is generating, the results she is measured for. Because what that does, it helps people to see, oh, okay, this is a strategic idea. It's not just a nice to have. Because a lot of times people think emotional intelligence is something that's just nice to have. But the work we do is to help you see it's actually a strategic advantage when you are intentional. And then after that, it's okay, so what's the roadmap to move forward? How does Juliet develop this greater empathy? How does Juliet become more aware in the moment of the impact she's having on the team? And so often that means a coaching journey, because it's not something that happens overnight. It's something that we need to work on together. If we're working with a team, then, the approach is similar. we want to have the team do some sort of baseline understanding of where they are. Then the same thing, we call it the business case for emotional intelligence. For us, for leaders, that's critical, because if leaders don't understand the why, they're not going to invest in the effort that's required to begin making the necessary changes. So after we've really unpacked the business case, help them to understand why this is of strategic importance, then we begin the work of, okay, let's take those steps. And often that means either group coaching, it could be a training that we take the leaders through. In the end, the intervention really does depend on the individual, but that's roughly the idea. And then at the end of the intervention, we want to measure what has the impact been? Has there been change? What is the impact, with Juliet's team, for example? So we have tools like 360 tools that help us to get insight from team members on, the changes they've seen. I recently did actually a 360 with my team, and it was really encouraging to see some of the comments that, okay, we can see Mucha's working. Because even for me, there are things that I'm growing in. I use the example of empathy because empathy is my weakness. I'm not naturally empathic at all. I've really had to invest in the skill of reading between the lines. I am, when we measure, one of the things we measure is, is your brain more geared to picking up on the rational data or the emotional data? So my brain picks up the rational, right? I notice the pictures that are out of sync. I notice the chairs that are not aligned, but I can really walk into a room and fail to pick up on the negative energy. So that's something I've really had to consciously, intentionally work on to kind of build my capacity to pick up on that emotional data. And so it's always encouraging when the team mentions, a good example is I'm the kind of leader who'd want to start a meeting and let's get on with it. Let's move on. Like, where are we? What's happened? What was the last? Hey? Oh, okay. Juliet, how are you doing today? And genuinely, I have to remind myself. And it's not because I'm not interested in my team, but because I'm goal-oriented as a person.
We are here for different purpose.
That's where my mind goes. So I've had to coach myself, and I have a coach, on the people matter. We're leading humans. So let's start with checking in with the humans. Let's start with making sure that people are okay before we dive into the agenda. So that's what an intervention would look like.
Okay. And is there a balance in terms of ratings? I don't know what type of rating indicates I'm good at, I'm good at emotional intelligence. Is it 50%, 70, 100? Is there a balance? Like you mentioned rational and empathy. So is there in between?
So the idea is it's a balance, and what we teach, depending on the different assessment we use, we have some assessments where it's a score, and then there's some assessments where it's a rating. So the one I described is called your brain profile, which looks at what your brain's tendency is. And the idea of that one isn't to say one is better than the other. It's to say there's a place for both. So what we're coaching you on is what we call cognitive flexibility, which is your ability to shift from your default to what is required in the moment. So it's being able to come into a space and recognize, okay, my default is the rational data. So I've already quickly picked up on the rational data, but right now I need to flex my muscles and move into the emotional so I can connect with people. And it's that cognitive flexibility that we coach you on. The other assessment, which is now a scoring assessment, what we do is we measure against the global average, and we talk about where you are in relation and the work you need to do on that. But all of our interventions are really about the individual, right? And what you're trying to achieve, what outcome we're looking for. So we always start with the end in mind, and then that helps us to work on the intervention. But I think a lot of times people can become obsessed with a score, like, okay, I scored 90 or I scored, but it doesn't matter, because, you could also overuse a skill, right? So if you are high in empathy, it can also cast a shadow. It can also cast a shadow, because often people who are high in empathy towards others are low in empathy towards themselves. And that can cast a shadow. So the conversation we'd have is, okay, we see this is a very clear strength on your score. How is it serving you? But how is it also undermining you? Where are places where, it's not serving you well? And how can you find that balance?
Okay.
Yeah.
You've talked about bottom line. There are organizations that are highly focused on profit. So when we start talking about emotional intelligence, it's a hindrance towards profit. So how do you balance that off? And in some situations, there's burnout, there's high turnover. So how do you balance that off? Especially when they're recruiting, they usually hire people also who are rational and high performance?
I think, again, it's just going back to that conversation about the bottom, the impact. We have data. And when we're talking with C-suite, because the truth is they're not interested in hearing about feelings. They don't think feelings matter more often than not. Let me not generalize, but a lot of times when you start the conversation. But what we do is show them the impact. The bottom line is people do well when they're in a good space. It's that simple. Now, what happens in organizations is that in the short term, you are able to get results when you push without concern for how people are doing. But that is a short-term approach. So what we highlight is the fact that if you want sustainable performance, if you want people who are going to give of their discretionary effort, then emotional intelligence is critical. And we have data that shows this. The truth of the matter is when you're talking to people at that level, what they want to see is how this process we're talking about actually helps them to receive the results they're looking for. So the work we would do is to understand what are those results you're trying to achieve? What are those numbers? What is that turnaround that you're seeking? And then we showcase how the work we would do with your team actually helps you to get there. And a lot of time we have conversation about, you gave the example of turnover. Do you know how expensive turnover? Well, I'm asking like you don't know. You know how expensive turnover is, right?
Yeah.
So if that is the issue we've identified, we have a conversation and we can pull out the numbers. Let's have a look, right? So you've got this high-performing leader, but we have to ask the question, is that leader worth the turnover you're getting? If they're not willing to change, is it worth it? And sometimes you realize that when you actually put the numbers, sometimes you don't look at the numbers for real. When you put the numbers and you compare this individual who seems to be a high performer, but you're getting constant turnover, you're having to rehire, there's a cost to the hiring process. You're having to retrain, there's a cost to the training process. When someone goes, there's a cost to offboarding them. When you weigh up those things, you realize that actually maybe we aren't making the kind of financial decision we think we're making. So those are the conversations we have, right, to help people understand how this is not just a nice to have. It is it's of strategic importance.
Okay. Do most team members also take advantage? Let's say you do a survey and the question is, one of those questions is about emotional intelligence and they rate their manager very low because now they want a manager who's soft, who's not, doesn't keep them accountable. So do people take, I feel people take advantage.
So I think one of the things you've raised is one of the biggest misconceptions we have about emotional intelligence, right? Emotional intelligence is not being soft. It isn't. Actually, if you are soft, you are lacking in emotional intelligence because emotional intelligence holds people accountable. When I'm high in empathy, true empathy is not about letting people go and get away with murder. True empathy is holding you accountable, but recognizing that as I hold you accountable, you're a human being. So your child is in hospital. I'm really sorry. How can we support you as you navigate that? In addition to supporting you navigate your child being in hospital, how do we make sure that you still meet your deliverables? That's the conversation we're having. Just because your child's in hospital doesn't mean work stops. So how do we manage both? How do we support you to be there with your child, but still deliver on what needs to be delivered? That's what empathy is. It's not, sorry, you're not feeling okay. We'll check in tomorrow. No, that's not empathy. That's not emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence isn't being soft. And so a person who is high in emotional intelligence doesn't entertain nonsense. If you fail to deliver, we're going to have that tough conversation. But we're having the tough conversation with the understanding that you are a human being. So I'm talking to you. I'm wanting to understand what happened, what's going on that's caused this end result. But if consequences must apply, consequences apply. So I think that, true emotional intelligence doesn't allow people to take advantage because you hold them accountable. You set very clear boundaries and you just engage them and help them to understand that my emotional intelligence doesn't mean anything goes. Actually, people who are high in emotional intelligence hold their team to a higher standard. If I'm empathic, I hold my team to a higher standard because at the end of the day, I want my team to know I'm available for them.
Yeah.
I will give them the space they need, but I'm expecting results at the same time. How do we manage both of those together?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go back to business owners.
Yes.
You mentioned a rational mind.
Yes.
So business owners, they have one goal. Sometimes your deadlines are tight.
Yeah.
You have maybe 2 team members or 1 team member.
Yeah.
So how does a business owner now, bring in emotional intelligence when they're running their own business?
I mean, I think I can speak in my own experience. I'm a business owner, right? I think the truth is, and look, I don't always get it right myself, right? So I'm also on my learning journey. But the truth of the matter is, again, this idea that people actually give more and give of their discretionary effort when they are working with a leader with high emotional intelligence. Research shows this. And so as a business owner, you want that, because as a business owner, you're working with limited resources. So you want discretionary effort. You want to tap into that desire an employee has to do more than, to go over and above, right? To go the extra mile. And so the way you do that is to create an environment where they thrive, to create an environment where, yes, we are chasing after the goals. We are hungry to achieve them, 100%. Right? In our team, we have for this year some big, hairy, audacious goals, and we're chasing after them. But again, we're working with human beings, right? We're working with human beings. And so it's really important. And as a business owner, there are some simple things that you can do. Things that don't even cost as much as we think, that can help to create the right kind of environment for our team. Number one, time for the team to just spend time together and bond. Right? That's really critical. People to let down their hair, to laugh a little, even in the midst of the chasing for the deals that we're doing. That really helps people to have some downtime. And when people have downtime, they're refreshed, they're able to work more effectively. Number two, creating an environment of psychological safety where people can give feedback and can speak honestly about what's going on for them in their personal life, but more so in terms of work itself. Too often we have environments where people are too afraid to say, okay, I'm a bit stuck. I don't really know what to do. And that wastes time, right? That's time you can't afford as a business owner, especially if you're running a small business.
Yeah.
So creating the psychological safety that allows people to actually speak, say, I need help, or to push back, or to ask questions, or to say, I don't understand, right? So that psychological safety is really important. And that's a critical part of emotional intelligence. And coupled with that is people being able to, ask questions and give feedback, right? So that's really critical.
Yeah.
And then last, I think, is a leader who models emotional intelligence themselves, right? So that self-awareness, that ability to manage self. The truth is, when you're leading a team, temperatures are going to rise. There is something powerful about a leader who can take a breath and say, okay, let me just take a minute, right? Who can regulate themselves. When you self-regulate as a leader, it demonstrates that it's a capability we can all develop, even in the midst of, the rush for the business we're trying to achieve. So I think for business owners, emotional intelligence is actually more important than not. Because you are working often with limited resources and you're trying to get the most you can out of those resources, including your own self, right? And so that emotional intelligence is even more critical than when you have a large organization that has, untold resources to their disposal. And so investing in that EQ, starting with yourself as a leader, building your capacity for self-awareness, self-management, and self-direction, it will make such a big difference for the team. I see it for myself in my team, that my EQ journey, it's had an impact on our business. It has had an impact on our business because, like I said, I became aware of some of my blind spots. I became aware of some of the things that I don't do so well, right? I don't ask for help so well. It's like, okay, no, I need to. And the problem is, if I don't ask for help, I'm creating a culture where people don't ask for help.
Okay.
Because
is it also
you model
important
it.
for us to do one-on-one meetings?
100%.
Okay.
100%.
So that's part of psychological
100%.
safety.
That is part of the psychological safety, yes.
Okay.
If you are not doing one-to-one meetings with your team, that's a very easy way to start on building that psychological
And how
safety.
often should they happen?
You know
Especially
what?
for business owners.
For business owners, you might do it bi-weekly, because
It's a lot, eh?
you might, that's, I think one of the things I'm learning is that oftentimes as business owners, we are the ones in the way of our growth.
Oh, because we want to
We are
everything.
investing, we are spending time on the things that are not as important as the things that are important. It's like that whole demonstration, I think that Stephen Covey does, where he has a jar and he has big rocks and small rocks, and he pulls a woman from the stage and asks her to put them all in the jar. and she doesn't manage the first time, and then he now gives her advice, start with the big rocks first. And then when you put the big rocks in, you find that there's space for the smaller rocks, and then the sand, when you pour it in, it fills the gaps. As business owners, we need to become more conscious of what the big rocks are. We need to become more conscious of the big rocks are. And some of that is also coaching the team. So one of the things that I've been doing lately is coaching my team on things that I need to be involved in, right? So I'm called into a meeting, and the meeting starts. And, and like I said, remember I said empathy is not being soft. So a conversation I had with a team member not so long ago was, okay, if you calculate my hourly rate, do you think this is a good time? This is a good use of my time.
Yeah, I do the same.
Yeah. It's not a good use of my time to be in a meeting where we are. Yeah. So no, can we put a pause on that and you guys meet? Bring me in when you need to bring me in, right? If I do more of that as a leader, I have more time for one-on-ones.
Okay.
I have more time for one-on-ones.
Bi-weekly.
If you can't do bi-weekly, then at least monthly.
Monthly.
At least monthly, you should be having check-ins with your team. And, it helps you. Check-ins with your team is on multiple fronts, right? So let's even talk a little bit about this check-in.
Yeah.
This check-in is not just to check in on work. It's checking in on the person. So you need to create an agenda for your check-in. And that agenda should include time where you are checking in with the person. And what check-ins do is they help you to keep track of where people are. Where you're starting to lose someone, where they seem to have lost their mojo. You can tell. If you're meeting someone regularly, you begin to tell. Check-ins also allow you to coach. They allow you to identify someone's strengths, someone's areas of development, and you can spend a few minutes. And, you can do micro coaching, like 5 minutes of supporting someone so that each time they meet with you, you are spending some time on coaching. And then you're diving into the work itself to talk about where people are, where do they need help, what they're struggling with, etc., etc. So when you block off, let's say, an hour for your check-in, maybe 35 minutes is the work itself, 25 minutes is checking in with a person, doing a little bit of coaching, so that you are, and it's in that quadrant, the time management quadrant. It's those things that are important but not urgent. And the problem with the important, not urgent, is that we keep putting them off.
Yeah.
Right? You schedule a meeting and then
a client calls, you cancel.
So one of the things that I'm trying to do with my team is to emphasize, and remember, monkey see, monkey do, right? So what I model is what is the reality. So one of the things I try and do is, so we schedule our meetings for a Monday, because Monday is less likely to be a training day with clients. And, when clients ask, not available. Oh, yeah, no, that day's not available. Sorry. And you don't have to tell a client it's not available because it's your team meetings. As far as the client is concerned, it's another client. So it's jealously guard that time with your team.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's a big takeaway for me. The other question, we did a poll on LinkedIn and we asked, what is the biggest thing that breaks teams? And the people mentioned, it was 47% was workplace politics. So how do we maneuver that?
Don't play the game, right? Because the truth is that what increases is what we entertain. So what do I mean by don't play the game? So for example, if a member of the team comes to you and they want to talk about another member of the team, how you handle that begins to set the tone for your organization, especially if this member of the team is not one who directly reports to you. So those are some of the conversations you need to have as a leader around, okay, before we continue with this conversation, have you spoken to Juliet? No. All right. So can I call Juliet in so that we have this discussion together? No. Okay. So let's deal with that. I think for me as leaders, just really being very intentional about not contributing. You may never be able to snuff out all politics because each individual is playing their own game. But what you can do is ensure that you are not participating so that it's not something that's then a culture that's being developed, that you are really supporting people to have the conversations they need to have. Oftentimes as leaders, we have a savior complex where we think we have to solve every problem, but you don't. You really don't. You need to encourage your team. You need to encourage your team to build the muscle to have those difficult conversations with each other.
Okay.
And when people recognize that, they see that, okay, well, there's no point going to Mucha with this because she's not going to entertain the conversation.
Okay.
And they learn to begin to have conversations. I think the other thing when it comes to politics is making increased transparency, because sometimes the politics is as a result of a lack of transparency. There's a lot of corridor gossip. So I think when we enhance transparency, make it clear what our processes and procedures are, make it clear about, how we deal with promotions, make it clear on how we allocate responsibilities. So the more clarity we can bring, we're ensuring that there's less opportunity for that corridor gossip that can then impact or make people feel like they need to play a game. They need to, curry favor with this person or curry favor with that person. Because a lot of times that politics, that's what it's about.
Yeah.
It's someone wanting to grow, right? And they think that the way to grow is, if I make friends with Juliet and Juliet likes me, she's going to. But if it's not down to Juliet liking you, if in the end, when we say we are promoting, yeah, okay, fine, maybe as a manager, Juliet has a say, but we're going to measure this and we're going to measure that, then I'm going to spend less time trying to curry favor with Juliet and focus on the things that are being measured. So I think building that transparency is really important so that people know exactly what is the process that we follow as an organization. I think those are maybe the two things I would say that would help with dealing with, because it can really become a big problem in organizations.
In small organizations, that might work, but in bigger organizations, I think most people mentioned in bigger organizations, it even goes down to the team members or the company doing a survey and mentioning directly, for example, we don't like Juliet because Juliet is not a people's person. So it goes directly to that. So is it a safe space for employees? So if, let's say, for example, I'm a HR leader and a survey has been done and it's Juliet needs to go because she's not a people's person.
Yeah.
So is it a safe environment or is it time for Juliet to leave?
I mean, I think you would not make a decision on the basis of just a survey because, employees can use surveys to settle scores.
Yes.
Especially in large organizations. So I think for me, what would need to be done is a bit more research into what exactly is going on. Obviously, when we do those surveys, they are confidential, so we don't know who says this.
Yeah.
But I do think there's ways you can get a bit more information. And remember, in a large organization is made up of microclimates, right? So yes, what I described may be easy for a small organization, but remember, we have microclimates. So let's say, for example, I am the CEO and I have my core leadership team. If within that core leadership team, I cultivate that culture of when you want to come and talk about this person, I ask, is this person part of it? Then it trickles down. Then I coach my team that within their team, that is the behavior I expect of them. Within that team, that is the behavior that is expected. You actually find that within a large organization, you still get that same ripple. Because the truth is, and I know you will agree with me on this, what happens is organization starts at the top.
Yeah, true.
When we see that politicking, it's just a replica of what's happening at the top. It's very rare that stuff like that happens at the lower levels. They're just replicating what they are seeing. So I do think that in those microclimates, we can begin to change how we interact with each other, and that can trickle down. But, to your specific question around like a survey and a specific person, I would, at that point, try and do a bit more sleuthing to understand, what really is going on before making a decision. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So as a leader, you mentioned regulating your emotions. So what other practices can we do to regulate our emotions? I'll give you, for example, a team member we've lost a client because of a team member and it's worth a certain million, or we didn't close a certain deal, or they didn't come, so something dropped off. So how do we regulate? Now, you've been running this business, you've used your money, you've taken loans. So how do you regulate?
Look, I mean, I think at the end of the day, we are human beings, right? And self-regulation doesn't mean that we don't deal with the issue. And what we need to identify quickly is, is this issue a matter of negligence on the part of the individual, or is it a mistake that they genuinely made? So let me take some step backs first to regulating yourself so that you can make that determination, right? the key about regulation is there's regulation on two fronts. There's regulation in the moment, and there's what we call preemptive regulation. So preemptive regulation, I like to use the example of an escalator. And I always share how when my kids were younger, I have 2 boys, they used to like running down the escalator that's going up. So if you think about an escalator that's going up, the higher up the escalator, the harder it is for you to run down, right? You can run down easier when you're in the first few steps. So what that analogy is to say is that your emotional temperature and climate, where you are on the escalator, will determine how easy it is for you to have a regulated conversation. So preemptive regulation is about the things that you are doing as a leader to ensure that you are decompressing regularly. Running a business, leading a team, those are very taxing things to do. It's taxing to be a leader. Leadership is not for sissies, is what I always say. True leadership is not for sissies. It's hard work. So as a leader, what are you doing to ensure that you are regularly decompressing? What are you doing to ensure that you are bringing yourself down? Because the truth is, the daily work you're doing is taking up the escalator. So what are you doing to ensure that you're bringing yourself down? So this is to your self-care. This is to, the work you're doing maybe with your coach. This is, how you are prioritizing, family time, if that decompress, whatever. We're different. Different people find different things help them. So what you want to do is you want to, in anticipation of the crisis, you want to make sure that you are cultivating a space of inner calm, or at least, because, more often than not, when you're running a business, you're probably always low levels of stress, but at least you're maintaining the levels are low, right?
Yeah.
And you're being intentional about noticing when the temperature has gone up. And you're saying, okay, wait a minute. Hey, okay, I feel like I'm up the escalator. So how can I bring myself down? How can I, maybe I need a weekend away. Maybe I need to go for a long drive. Maybe I need an extra run this weekend, whatever it is. So that's the first part. Self-regulation starts with preemptive regulation. What are you doing preemptively to keep yourself in a state of balance as much as is possible? Then in the moment, right, when your button has been pushed, you are more likely to be able to respond in a regulated manner if you are in a general state of calm, right? I always give the example. Like I said, I have 2 boys, and when they were young, my kids are real boys, like completely, oh my goodness, so much energy, like here, there, everywhere. And I used to tell my friends that my kids go to bed at 8, not for their own good, but for my good. Because after 8 o'clock, I've enough. I can't. And I know I'm going to start shouting. I'm going to start, you know what I mean? So it's realizing and putting those boundaries in place first. So that's preemptive, right? Then in the moment, there are many things that you can do to help regulate yourself. We're encouraged to take a pause, to take a breath. Now, you've heard that idea, count to 10.
Yeah.
Counting to 10 is actually physiological, because in the moment when your buttons are pushed, if you recall earlier, I talked about the fact that our emotions are powerful enough to override rational thinking. So when we are under pressure, the emotional part of the brain hijacks the rational part of the brain because it wants to act fast. But when you just take a few minutes and you take a breath, what happens is the rational part of the brain catches up. So sometimes it's just having some water.
Relax.
Take a sip.
Yeah.
We lost what?
A billion.
Now, I'm sure your employees understand that you are human.
Yeah.
And emotional intelligence does not mean you become, you lose your humanity. So I think it's okay to lose your cool. But I think it's one of those things where it's in those moments and you're quick to kind of take a breath and catch yourself. And if necessary, take a walk. Like, okay, let me just, I'll be right back. Right? So you can calm yourself down so that we can have a conversation that is with a fellow human being. Now, remember what I said. Once I've kind of taken a breath, what I'm trying to ascertain is this negligence? Because if it's negligence, it must be dealt with. Remember, emotional intelligence is not about being soft.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And if someone needs to go, they need to pack their bags and go. But there's no need for them to go after you've called them all manner of names, after you've said their mother is this and their father is that. I mean, that's not necessary. But if they need to go, they need to go. If it was a genuine mistake, sometimes you still need to sleep on it so that you can have a conversation. Because remember, how you handle mistakes also impacts how the team works tomorrow. Right?
Yeah.
Yes, it's $1 billion, true. But if it was a genuine mistake, how you handle that means everything as far as how the team continues to work. Because what you don't want the team what you don't want to happen is the team to end up in such a state of fear that they are now paralyzed from making decisions. Because, okay, if I do this and then it backfires. So you need to handle that well. But it doesn't mean we can't have a tough conversation.
Okay.
It doesn't mean we can't have a tough conversation. We emotional intelligence is not avoiding tough conversations. It's having them, but it's having them with heart.
Okay.
It's having them and saying, okay, Juliet, I realize that it may not have been your intention, but this is what's the consequence of the choice you've made.
Okay.
So let's have a conversation about what happened so that we can learn from it. Right? And it's not easy to have that kind of conversation in the moment.
Yeah.
That's why I say sometimes it's receive the news and take a walk. Sometimes. Because it's very hard in the moment when you're talking about $1 billion lost to have a conversation. But how you handle failure in your team is critical for team dynamics.
Okay. I work a lot with the small, medium businesses, and the reactions, some of the reactions are quite extreme. I've actually been called to even cancel just the team members because there were there were some insults.
Yeah.
So you see, an SME, if I'm a business owner, I am the beginning and the end. So it's not like a corporate where there's a structure.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether something like emotional intelligence coaching, some of the SMEs, especially in Kenya, are able to see it as a must do and not a nice to have. Yeah.
And that's the conversation we have with the SMEs that we interact with, that it's actually it will impact your revenue generation, right? But it's not always easy to see that, because remember, this is something that you see the impact of it a little bit further down the line. It doesn't necessarily always give you immediate results. But I'm sure you will agree with me, in those instances where you've gone in and you've had to undo the damage, if we were to monetize that damage, you will see that that's it. It actually, it's a big impact on
It's actually
my
unnecessary
bottom
because
line.
they have to pay me, so it's unnecessary.
Yeah. So the ability to pause, and you're more likely to be able to pause if you are self-aware. So if you know that, okay, when my buttons are pushed, I have a tendency to fly off the handle, then you can remind yourself that, okay, I can feel. So that's why self-awareness is the start of emotional intelligence for me, because you cannot manage what you don't know. Right? So it starts with self-awareness. It starts with recognizing that, hey, it's like me knowing that after 8 o'clock, after the day I've had, I'm done. I can't. And I know we're going to start shouting, And so part of my journey as a recovering shoutaholic was to make sure that by 8 o'clock, my boys are in bed so that I can have time to also decompress. Because I noticed that I'm more likely because I'm tired. I've had a day where I'm working, I've come home, I'm interacting with my kids, and I love spending time with my kids. We've had dinner together, we're interacting with each other. But at some point, okay, no, I've overextended. So I need time out, right? And that time out means, let's go to bed. And on the days when my kids were much younger, on the days where it'd been brutal, 7 o'clock was bedtime. When kids can't tell the time, you just tell them it's 8. Because I just know that I can't even last another hour. I'm done.
Yeah.
So I think it's building that awareness of what are my triggers is so critical. It's really critical, because then when I become more aware of my triggers, I can see it coming. And when I see it coming, I'm like, okay, let's take a break. Because the damage you can do is it's
actually even court cases.
terrible.
Or people are kicked out, like they're told to leave without proper process. So then a lot of court cases start. Yeah. Okay. Do you feel as women that we are held into a higher standard when it comes to leadership? If a man shouts, it's different compared to how a woman shouts.
100%. Definitely. As women, we are held to a higher standard. And I mean, I think that's just the reality for us as women in all spaces, but definitely in leadership spaces. When a man is, loud and boisterous, he's passionate. When a woman is, she's aggressive. It's like, it's the same thing, right?
Or masculine.
Yes.
Yes.
And so what that does is it causes women to want to go into spaces and kind of shrink themselves, which is then counterproductive. But yes, women are definitely held to a different standard. And so you're constantly having to, regulate yourself to just try and determine, am I going to be seen as Kimbelembele? If I, you know what I mean? Or am I going to be, and that's the constant conversation you're having with yourself. I think I've learned that I just need to be myself in the different spaces where I'm at. And I think I'm learning that I'm not responsible for how other
your
people.
perception, yeah.
No,
Other people's perception.
I'm not. I really am not. I think one of the reasons why they say that life begins at 40s, I think because when you hit your 40s, and I'm almost 50, I turned 50 this year.
Oh.
When you hit your 40s and 50s, you really come to the realization that life is for living and not living for other people, right? And I think that's also what my EQ journey has taught me is I'm responsible for how I show up, 100%. I'm responsible for making sure I am self-aware. But at the end of the day, I'm not responsible for their perception. I'm not.
It's a good mindset.
Yeah, I'm not. And I think that one of the biggest challenges we have as women is we like to be liked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've let go of that. It's like it's too much pressure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's too much pressure, and I think, yeah, so I think measure yourself on the impact you've had, and measure yourself on the respect that you've earned, rather than measuring yourself on, whether people like you or measuring yourself on, a standard that you're never going to meet. I'm not a man. I'm never going to be a man. I don't want to be a man, right? So I think the way I help others to stop measuring me in that way is to just show up as my authentic self. And the more I do that, the more people realize, okay, this is my authentic self. And I remember I was doing this coaching program with a series of leaders. So it was a combination of training and coaching. And it was in an environment where this lady was not only one of few women, but one of few Black women. And she says that, she's constantly thinking I must tone down my voice because I'm perceived as loud and aggressive. Yeah. And, we had some conversations around how to manage that. Yes, be respectful of other people's cultures, but at the same time, it doesn't mean shrinking yourself, right? It doesn't, because then you're constantly shrinking yourself, which means you're not going to be as effective in doing the work that you need to do. And at the end of the day, you were hired, right? Someone hired you and felt that you are bringing something to the table. So maybe that passion that you bring is actually what's necessary for the team. And so stop being so apologetic about it. Because when we talk about, being adaptive in our cultures, it's a two-way street, right? So others also must be adaptive to culture. Yeah. So I think those are some of the things that we had the conversation around. Being respectful of others, but at the same time not doing it to the extent that you're now shrinking yourself. Yeah.
Okay. That's good. I don't know whether this is a good question to ask. Have you had in your coaching as like a success story? Like this was just a gone case and then now immunity elevated to 100%?
I mean, I think so, yes. I mean, I think people are always on a journey. So I don't think you ever arrive. But I think for me, success stories are less about the impact and more about the transformation within the individual. Because I know when there's that transformation, it's going to have replicated impact, right? So yes, it's working with leaders who are, for me, lacking in self-awareness and helping them to build that self-awareness. For me, that is a success story. Because what I know is that will continue to generate impact long after we finish the coaching. Right? Long after we finish the coaching, if you can help a leader to recognize the triggers they have, to recognize the blind spots they have, to recognize the impact they're having on the team, that's gold, right? That is gold, because once they recognize that, firstly, doing the work of shifting is a lot easier because they can see why.
Yeah.
Secondly, you've built a muscle that they will keep exercising, like I said, long after the coaching sessions are done. So for me, my biggest success stories are the people who come and say, oh my goodness, wow, I see myself a lot clearer than I ever did before. And for me, that's the key. I mean, I think self-awareness is our EQ superpower.
Okay, I really like that. And okay, I'm also a therapist, and the uptake of therapy is higher in women than in men.
Yeah.
Is it the same in you?
100%. Yeah, 100%. We've cultured our men to not ask for help.
Yeah.
So we're seeing what we've cultured, right? In the same way we've cultured our women in some of the ways we have that are also detrimental to women. We've cultured men. And you know what's crazy is this. Knowing what I know, I still find some of that coming through in how I parent my sons. I have to stop myself. You know, there's times where my son will, burst into tears. And honestly, the honest truth, my gut response is, hey, stop crying, you're a man. And I actually have to stop myself and say, wait a minute, no, that's not what I want him to learn. What I want him to learn is, how do I deal with my emotions in a positive way? And maybe crying is what I need in this moment, right? So it's amazing to me how even for those of us who know better, you will still find yourself defaulting to some of those socializations that are not useful for us as human beings. And so, yeah, we're reaping what we've sowed.
Okay. Okay, so there's another quick fire question. Hire or fire again. A leader who delivers results but avoids difficult conversations. Hire or fire?
You know, my answer is going to be, is this leader coachable?
Coachable.
It's not a trait. You know, if we're talking about a trait, it would be a fire because you can't do anything about it. It's a skill. So as long as someone is coachable, as long as someone is willing to have the conversation about how, okay, not having these difficult conversations is a problem. How can we support you to have them? Then there'd be a hire.
Okay. Top performer who humiliates others in meetings.
Ooh, fire.
A leader who is liked by everyone, a politician, but technically incompetent.
Probably a fire.
A leader feared by the team, but praised by senior management.
Probably fire. We're killing psychological safety. So that's a problem. I guess we could have some conversations about whether this can be changed.
Yes.
And if it can be changed, then they would be retained. But that's a problem. Psychological safety is everything.
Important, yeah. A leader who gets results, but people don't grow under them.
I mean, again, it could be a leadership competency that just needs developing. Perhaps this is a leader who just doesn't realize how important it is to grow people. So I think it would be a conversation. Perhaps even put them on some sort of coaching plan where we have conversations and part of their output is now the development of their team. You know, because some things it's just because I don't know. Right? So that's why I'm thinking with each question, because I'm trying to figure out, is this a skill thing? Because remember, most of us aren't taught leadership, right?
Yeah. We find ourselves
figuring it out as we go along.
Yeah.
We are going on the basis of what we saw our leaders do. So I think a question like that, it could just be a lack of knowledge. And so if it's a lack of knowledge, then we have a conversation about what they're going to do about it. I'd put them on some sort of plan where I want to see how they're developing their team. And if they're able to do that, then they're a keep.
Okay. So as we close, what would you tell a high performing leader, one uncomfortable truth about them? And which books would you recommend for us to read to just, because it's a journey, emotional intelligence is a journey.
All right.
Which books would you recommend?
Ask that question again. I wasn't clear about the question.
If you had to tell every high performing leader one uncomfortable truth about themselves, what would that be?
I would tell them that they're biased.
Okay.
I tell them that as long as you have a brain, you have bias. That's the way the brain is wired. So what are you doing about it? How are you intentionally discovering what your biases are so that you can navigate them more effectively? So I think that's the one truth I would tell them, that we are all biased as much as we think we are not. Every single one of us is. And it's because that's the way the brain works. The brain likes categorizing, and that's a strength so that the brain can deal with things in combinations, right? But it can be a challenge when it comes to leading. Books to read. So Joshua Friedman recently released a book called Emotion Rules. Recommended read. Joshua Friedman is the CEO for 6 Seconds. 6 Seconds is one of the largest emotional intelligence networks. It's the community that we're part of, and the book is phenomenal. So I would go online, just search for Emotion Rules by Joshua Friedman. He's been doing a lot of webinars about it as well. So if you're interested, and if you follow, we also talk about it. So that's one book I recommend. There's another book, and for the life of me, the name is just escaping me. It's by Dr. Susan David, and it's emotional. I can't think of the other word, but Dr. Susan David. If you look for Dr. Susan David, that's a really awesome book. I would recommend that as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And then another book I'd recommend that's actually not about emotional intelligence directly is a book called Good to Great.
Or Good to Great.
Yes, by Jim Collins. That's a phenomenal book. And it's a really good book if you're a business owner as well, and you're just thinking about how to grow your business, because it looks at it from a wholesome perspective and it speaks to leadership and then some elements of what we've talked about today.
Okay. Thanks, Mucha. I have been following you for quite a long time, and I hope one day I will join your lunch and learn.
Yes, consider yourself invited.
I'll join next week. I'll be there.
Awesome.
Thank you for coming, and thanks for this conversation. I think my biggest takeaway, I need to schedule those one-on-one meetings for Monday. Even us will do ours on Mondays.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very so much. Thank you for having me. It's been awesome having the conversation.
Thank you. This episode is brought to you by Alternate Doors, your HR business partner.